Good afternoon, and welcome to another story time with Mrs. Walker. Today, for our read aloud, we are going to be starting a new chapter book. We've done an adventure chapter book when we did How to Train Your Dragon, and we did a humorous chapter book when we did My Very Word School, Mrs. Oh, shoot. Doyle is out of control. That was the name of that one. All right. So today we're going to start another one, and this one is a mystery. All right. I thought we would try one of the A to Z mysteries, the Castle Crime. I don't know that we'll get through it, but we'll at least get a good start on it. All right. So this one is one of those A to Z mysteries. We have the whole collection at school. So here is a map of London, which my guess is we're going to have something to do with that. We're going to need to know that as we move into our mystery. Here's another picture showing us the River Thames and the way you go to Windsor Castle and all sorts of fun stuff. So here we go. Chapter 1. Watch the traffic, Dink's father warned Dink, Ruth, Josh, and Ruth Rose. Don't forget, they drive on the left in England. They all stood across the road from Maine, from from the Madame Thou's Wax Museum in London, England. The building was long and gray and wet. Dink's father was in London for a conference and had invited the three kids along. It was their first time trip to Europe. So far, they'd visited Big Ben Clock, Buckingham Palace, and the Tower of London. Last night, the four had gone on the Jack the Ripper walking tour. A guide showed them the streets and alleys where the murderer had killed several women in 1888. The murderer was never caught. Yesterday, they had ridden the huge Ferris wheel called the London Eye. From the top, almost 450 feet off the ground, the kids could see most of London. Then the helicopter zoomed past them, and the pilot and Josh waved at each other. Let's cross, said Mr. Duncan, stepping over the puddle. It was raining lightly. Cars and buses swished past them, splashing water onto the sidewalks. Ivan, our tour guide, will meet us at the entrance number 1, Dink's father said. He and the kids stood in front of the museum. The sign on the building said Madame Tussauds. They saw an orange door with the big number 1 over it. Let me get a picture, Ruth Rose said. She pulled a small purple camera from her purple backpack. Her jeans, jacket, boots, and headband were also purple. Ruth Rose's outfits always matched. They were a different color each day. Cool, Josh said as he ran his fingers through his damp red hair. Smile, Ruth Rose said, aiming her camera. Standing in front of Mr. Duncan, Dink, Josh slung their arms around each other's shoulders. Dink grinned at the camera and Josh made a goofy face. How do I look? Josh said, crossing his eyes. You've lost your mind, Ruth Rose said. She pushed the button and got the shot. What mind? Dink asked, giving Josh a shove. The three kids were best friends. They lived in Greenlawn, Connecticut, more than 3,000 miles away from London. Let's go inside, Dink's father said. It's starting to rain harder. They walked towards the door. Who's Madame Trousseau? Josh asked. Her married name was Trousseau, but she was born Anna Maria Goursat, Rose said. She was born in France in 1861. She learned how to make wax figures that looked like real people and opened a museum here in London. People paid money to see the figures. How do you know this stuff? Josh asked Ruth Rose. She showed him her London guidebook. I studied it on the plane, she said. You kids ready? Dink's father asked as he rang the bell to the orange door. The door opened and a tall, thin man peered at them. He wore black rimmed glasses. The tag on his shirt said Ivan. Hi, are you the Duncans from the States? He asked. Ivan had spiky black hair with tips, and the tips of the spikes were bleached yellow. I'm Mr. Duncan, Dink's father told Ivan. This is my son Dink and his friends Josh and Ruth Rose. Come on in, said Ivan, and he glanced at his watch. Sorry to get here so late, Mr. Duncan said. I had a conference and just got out a few minutes ago. No problem, Ivan said. We still have 20 minutes before we close, and you can always come back tomorrow. They followed Ivan into the lobby with the ticket counter. The walls were covered with posters of famous people. A giant chandelier hung from the tall ceiling. Dink noticed a stack of bumper stickers for sale. They had Madame Trousseau's printed in bold black letters. Maybe I'll buy one on the way out, he thought. A tall woman walked up to the group. Her name tag said Mandy. She was dressed in a yellow sweatshirt with a picture of Madame Trousseau's on her front. She wore bright pink lipstick and green eyeshadow. She had chewing gum and was holding a cell phone. For you, Mandy said, handing the phone to Ivan. Ivan took the phone. Will you excuse me? He said to Dink's father and the kids. Mandy, would you take over? Sure, Mandy said as Ivan walked away. Are you a guide too? Ruth Ann asked. No, but sometimes I fill in. I usually work the wax heads, making sure the faces look real, Mandy said. I love using makeup. A small TV was perched on the shelf behind the ticket counter. The news was on, and a man with wavy hair was talking with a British accent. He doesn't sound like you, Josh said to Mandy. Are you from here? She shook her head. No, I'm from California. Cool, said Dink. Have you ever seen a movie stars? Plenty, Mandy said, and I worked on special effects at one of the movie studios. We turned actors into monsters with wigs, makeup, masks, fake claws, and lots of fake blood. That's awesome,
Why you ask her?
said Josh. And so, have you kids ever been to Madame Trousseau's wax museum before? Mandy asked. Mr. Duncan and the kids shook their heads. Is there more than one? Dink asked. Yes, there are 16 now. You have four in the United States, in New York, Las Vegas, Washington, D.C., and Los Angeles, and there are branches all over the world. Josh was staring at the TV set. Guys, did you hear that? He just said the Queen of England got robbed. Mandy walked over and turned down the sound. It happened yesterday on our birthday, she said. The Queen of England was born on April 21st. Ruth asked, and he nodded. Yes, in 1926, I think. What happened? Dink asked. The Queen was driving to Windsor Castle yesterday for a birthday party. She'd brought some of her favorite jewels with her. When they stopped the car, one of the robbers reached in through the window and grabbed her jewel case. Did she stop? Ruth Rose asked. The robbers were disguised as her grandson, Prince William and Prince Harry, Mandy explained. They were wearing life rubber masks. William and Harry are both in the military, so the robbers wore uniforms like theirs. I guess the Queen thought the robbers were her grandson, so she stopped and rolled down the window. Wow, said Josh. So, did they catch the guys? Did they find the jewels? No, said Mandy. Where's Windsor Castle? Ruth asks. I read that the Queen lives here in London at Buckingham Palace. Yes, you're right, said Mandy, but Windsor Castle is only a short drive away. And the Queen likes to go there on weekends. Her husband, Prince Charles, was there planning her party. Her two grandsons secretly showed up to surprise her. Wait, I'm so confused. You said the robbers were dressed like her grandsons. Where were her real grandsons? The real Prince William and Prince Harry were inside Windsor Castle waiting for her to arrive, Mandy explained. But the Queen didn't know that, of course. So when she saw the two robbers outside the castle grounds, she thought they were her grandson. So she stopped and they snatched her jewels. But how did the robbers know the Queen would be driving to Windsor Castle that day? Josh asked. And how did they know she'd have those jewels with her? Ruth Rose added. Mandy shrugged. I guess we'll never know, she said. What did the Queen do after she got robbed? Ruth Rose asked. Dink noticed Ruth Rose's eye open wide. She drove to the castle and called the police at Scotland Yard, Mandy said. Chapter 2. Mandy led the kids through a pair of black curtains. On the other side, they saw a room full of people. They weren't real people. They were man-made statues that looked alive. A few tourists were still wandering around. Oh my, Josh said. Oh my gosh, said Josh. There's Johnny Depp. And Kate Winslet, exclaimed Ruth Rose. And John Wayne, Dink added. They look so real. Are they made of wax? he asked Mandy. The heads are sculpted from wax, but not the bodies. She tapped on Babe Ruth's arm. It sounded hard like plastic. Long ago, Madame Trousseau used wax for the bodies as well, she explained, but wax melts and shrinks. So now we make the bodies out of fiberglass. Mandy, how long does it take to make one of these? About 4 months, Mandy said. If you come back another day, you can meet some of the artists who create them. Ruth Rose walked up to a close to a figure of a beautiful blonde woman. Is this Marilyn Monroe? She whispered. Mandy smiled. Gorgeous, isn't she? The famous movie star was wearing diamonds. Are her diamonds real? Dink asked. Nope, they're fake, just like all the jewelry in the museum, Mandy said. How about the hair? Josh asked. He was standing next to a statue with long hair and flowing beard. It's real human hair, Mandy told them. Each hair gets placed in the wax head by hand with tweezers, one hair at a time. Wow, that must take forever. Mandy smiled. About 6 weeks to do a head of hair, he said, pointing to Elvis Presley. We had to put 10,000 hairs in Elvis's head. What do you do when the hair gets dirty, Ruth? Rose asked. We shampoo it. That's why we use real human hair. We can even style it and cut it the way you do your own hair. They walked through another pair of black curtains. Suddenly, the room was red velvet walls, fancy furniture, and soft lighting from electric candles. This is the world leaders' room, Mandy said to the kids. Ivan was talking to a small group of tourists. He was explaining how the wax heads were made. Dink walked over to a figure of a woman with reddish hair. She was dressed in a black suit. He read the sign that said she was Margaret Thatcher. She had been the Prime Minister of the United States. I mean, of the United Kingdom. Ruth Rose and Josh were reading the sign too. So she was the president of England, Ruth Rose said. Cool. She was a big boss. Hey, look, here's our president, Josh said. He walked over to the current president. He wore a dark blue suit and a red tie. He was smiling and looked real. Where do you get the clothes? Ruth Rose asked. Usually, the subject gives us 2 sets of clothing. We dress the statue in one set and keep the other in our wardrobe room for emergencies. What kind of emergency? Josh asked. Well, as you can see, people like to walk right up and touch the statues. So, clothing gets dirty, smelly, and ripped sometimes. Once, a boy threw up on David Beckham's uniform. Roast, Josh blurted out. Mandy smiled totally. So we changed Beckham into a spare uniform. There's so much to see, Dink said. There were more than 40 world leaders in this room. You'll have more time to visit on your when you visit next, Mandy said. She looked at her watch. We close in 10 minutes. Put your London pass but your London pass lets you come back anytime you want. Is the Queen of England's figure here? Ruth Rose asked. She's in the next room, Mandy said. Follow me. On the other side of the black curtains was Queen Elizabeth. She stood next to a red and gold chair. Gathered around her, the Queen were her husband, Prince Philip, her son, Prince Charles, and the Queen's 3 grandsons, Prince Harry and Prince William. Metal poles held the velvet rope that stretched around the royal family, keeping kids and Mr. Duncan about 10 feet away. Why is the rope here, but not around any other figure? Mandy rested her hand on top of the rope to keep people away from the Queen. Too many tourists like touching her. Wow, they look so real. Yes, William and Harry came in not too long ago to have their pictures taken with their wax figures. You could hardly tell them apart. The men are a lot taller than the Queen, Dink said. She's average height, Mandy said, about 5 feet 5 inches. But her son, Charles, is nearly 6 feet, and both of her grandsons are about 6'3". Even the fake diamonds look real, said Ruth Rose. The Queen wore a diamond tiara on her white hair and a fabulous diamond necklace around her neck. Yes, they're made to look identical to the Queen's own jewels, she said. In fact, her tiara and necklace were stolen yesterday. The four stared at the royal family. Prince William had blonde hair and wore a navy jacket and black tie. His cap was black and had wide red band over the bill. His brother Harry had orangey red hair and he was wearing a red tunic with silver buttons. The white belt was cinched at his waist. The silver belt buckle gleamed under the lights. Both men wore white trousers, white cotton gloves, and black shoes. It almost seemed like they could wake up and walk around. How do those boys make those aisles look so real? Josh asked. Mandy tapped her watch. I can show you, but not today, she said. As they passed through the black curtains, Dink noticed a man standing near Albert Einstein. He was holding a sketch pad and a pencil. I should have brought my sketching stuff, said Josh. The kids watched the man making swift marks on his pad. He was tall with a short beard. His hair was hidden under a baseball cap. Mandy walked up to the man. Sir, I'm sorry, but we're closing in a few minutes. The man nodded, closed his pad, and strolled towards the exit. As Mandy led the group out, Ruth Rose peeked into the open doorway. Oh, is this where the extra clothes are kept? She asked. Yes, Mandy said. Want a quick peek? She led them into a large room with carpet on the floor. Everywhere the kids looked were racks of clothing. Each rack was inside a glass case. Dink noticed a small round lock on each case. Above the cases were also shelves holding fake jewelry, wigs, hats, beards, and a row of false teeth. The short gray A woman with short gray hair sat at the table in the corner stitching a pink dress. 3 fingers on each hand were wrapped in band-aids. On the table were scissors, a jar of pins, and a tape measure, and a ring of keys lay next to the scissors. Sophia is repairing a gown that got ripped when someone stepped onto it, Mandy said. Why does she have all those band-aids on? Ruth Rose asked. To protect her fingers, Mandy said. Those scissors and needles are sharp. Sophia looked up and smiled at the kids, but went back to her work. In another corner, Dink noticed a small desk with a bulletin board above it. A few pictures had been pinned to cork. Dink recognized Mandy with a smiling man in one picture. In another, Mandy was hugging a dog and the ocean water in the background. Next to the desk was a sink and a mirror under a small window, and a row of miniature bottles sat on the shelf above the window, each bottle filled with different colored liquid. What's in those little jars? Dink asked. Paint, said Mandy. We use them for quick repairs. The shoes get scuffed up a lot from tourists stepping on them. Sometimes our cleaning crew vacuums bang up against the shoes, and when this happens, we just choose the right color paint and place it and touch up the scuff. If it gets really bad, we replace the shoe. Josh pointed to the jar of glass eyeballs. They look like marbles, he said, marbles that stare at you. Oh, those are old, Mandy said. We have better methods of making eyes now. If you come back, I'll show you how we do it. She waved a hand around the room. As you can see, we have thousands of clothing changes, she went on. If a little boy vomits on anyone else, we can have an outfit dry cleaned and the figure in the spare outfit. This is amazing, Josh said, as they were surrounded by hundreds of suits, jackets, dresses, fur coats, hats, scarves, canes, uniform. One rack held hundreds of neckties. Why is everything inside the cases? Dink asked. To protect the clothing from getting dusty, Mandy said. How do you find what you need? Ruth Rose asked. Each rack is labeled. For example, world leaders, the royal family, sports figures all have separate racks. Each outfit has a tag with the figure's name. And of course, every item of clothing is in our computer. They heard a soft bell sound. 6 o'clock closing time, Mandy said, and she led the kids and Dink's dad towards the exit. And that ends chapter 2. And that's where we'll stop, guys, because we will begin chapter 3 on Monday. So,